Welcome back. I hope that was helpful, looking at those questions to help discover your uniqueness and how God built you and the things that he fashioned you and put in you. All right, this next section, we are going to talk about the last component, and that is our current reality or our sphere of influence. Because God has not only given you this incredible purpose of glorifying God and this amazing mission that we get to be co-missioned with Jesus on, of making disciples of all nations, and this incredible uniqueness, but he has placed us right here, right now, for such a time as this. Get this verse in Acts 17:26. It says, "From one man he made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he determined the times set for them and the exact places where they should live." Awesome, right? Have you ever thought about God specifically picked you for this time period? That is really cool if we think about the implications of that. But you were picked to live now in order to make an eternal impact. And as you are all in, giving yourself to live on mission in your Jerusalem, Acts 1:8 says that you will be reaching the Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the uttermost parts of the earth. But we need to train our brains to think broader, because we often get stuck in our sphere of influence being this big when really it's not that big. It is much, much bigger. We need to seek first the expansion of God's kingdom, keeping our eyes fixed on him, fixed on eternity, and the rest will get thrown in, right? In Matthew 6:33, talks about seek first my kingdom, and all of these things will be added to you as well. But if we stay in our little bubble, living for our own little American dream of being comfortable and having convenient things, storing up in treasure in heaven will not get thrown in. It won't. So we need to keep our eyes on Christ and continually think of ways that we can make Jesus known. All right. For example, there's one thing, Facebook. There's many people all over the world are on Facebook. And I was praying, I was like, God, there's people on here that don't know the gospel in other countries, these unreached countries, these unreached people groups that don't have one single believer. And we're right there on the same thing. Isn't there a way, surely, that you can use this to share the gospel with them? And many years ago, he gave me this idea, and we did it again just at a conference that we held this couple weekends ago. And it was so cool because we picked 3 countries. We picked Turkey, Morocco, and Indonesia, because they have these unreached people groups in those countries that have 0.00% Christians or 0.01% Christian there. And yet they use Facebook. So what we did is we built a Facebook ad that pointed to the Jesus film in their language. And then we put the ad in their country. And over a span of 3 days, it cost less than a penny for each viewing. There was over 12,000 people in those places that got to see the Jesus film, who got to hear about Jesus, the God who put on skin to live the perfect life they couldn't live and die in their place. Mind-blowing, right? All because we live now in this time period with access to social media, that we can reach other people without having to fly there and without having to speak their language. In a 3-day span, reach 12,000 people. Pretty cool. All right. Well, practically, how do we train our hearts and our brains to think broader, right? Well, first, we need to take charge of thinking of what we think about, right? We need to set our minds on things above, not on things on earth, kind of as Colossians 3 talks about. We need to not be controlled by the tyranny of the urgent, but instead be in charge of what we think about. We need to demolish arguments, everything raised up against the knowledge of God, all right? Our taking control, taking our thoughts captive is where it starts. And I remember my youth pastor when I was young, something that he challenged us to do that stuck with me years and years and crazy amount of years later. He said, think about what you're thinking about. And I took him serious, and I did. And I tried to, as often as I could think about it, I would actually write it on my hand of what I was thinking about. And then I would be able to take that and take it captive and compare it to scripture. Is this what is true? And after days of doing that, it became more of a habit to actually think about what I'm thinking about and getting it in line with truth and what reality is. And this is such a big deal because what's in our brain, if we keep it there, it's gonna grow, and then it works into our heart as we begin to process it and think on it more and more and more, and then eventually it does get worked into our hands in the things that we do. So if we allow lies or other things to become strongholds in our mind, then we will end up living it out. So it's so important. So 3 practical things that we can do to keep the mission right in front of us, the making Jesus known right in front of us, is 1, we can read books that inspire us to live on mission. All right, books like Radical or like The Finishers, which is awesome, or The Unexpected Adventure. They are just so on track as far as keeping the mission right in front of you. I highly recommend reading them, even if it's just a couple pages a day, right? The second thing we could do is we can visit websites, we can listen to podcasts, things like that would help us live on mission. People who are talking about things. Obviously, missionalwomen.com would be one. Also, joshuaproject.net. All right, they talk about different ways that you can be praying for the world. And there's Kids on Mission on how to help train your kids to live on mission, activities that you can do with them. All right, so read books, visit websites, listen to podcasts. And then the third one is go on short-term missions trips. All right, these expand your vision of what God is doing around the world. It is so easy to your heart's not engaged if it's way over there and you've never been there. But if you've been there, you can see it, you experience it, and it takes it from here to here. And they are such good things to do. And also, you get to see God come through for you logistically. All right, when Asher was 1, we took him to Russia, and God provided. He provided a place for us that had a pack and play, that had kids' baby toys, that had food. I mean, just a short walking distance away, there was baby food. God provided everything that we needed, and we got to see that he actually did come through for us when we were stepping out and walking by faith. So, it might be that if you don't go, your loving Father might actually make you go. All right, this is what he did over and over and over in Scripture. He caused people to scatter because they weren't scattering themselves. They weren't going. In Acts 8, 1-4, Saul is ravaging the church in Jerusalem, and the believers are scattered. They are driven out to other places. They take the gospel to other places as a result. And then they finally got to be about sharing the gospel. And then also in Acts 11:19, the same thing. Saul was again persecuting the believers, but this time at Antioch, and caused them to scatter. So really, our nature of getting distracted from the Great Commission can be seen way, way, way back in Genesis 11, where God told them to go and to populate the whole earth. And what do? They start building this, their whole Tower of Babel to make a name for themselves. That's why they built it. And so instead of going, they wanted to make a name for themselves. And that can so easily be a distracting factor for us too, that we want to make a name for ourselves rather than make a name for Jesus. So let me show you what this life direction circles actually looks like. It is right here, okay? So we have our purpose, which is to glorify God. We have our mission, which is to make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded. All right, in Matthew 28, it's actually written down. We have our uniqueness, all the different ways that God fashioned each one of us. And we have our current reality that some people have more hours during the day, discretionary free time, I guess you could say, to make Jesus known, say if you're at work. And we have been put in different places in different seasons of life. So some people, if they have a 40-hour-a-week job, that is a big part where God's going to want to use them. And the different cities, or if you live in a big city, or if you live in a small town, that our current reality is where God has placed us. But if this can be like crazy overwhelming, right? If you're like, okay, I need to glorify God, and I need to like live out my uniqueness because, God's given me these gifts and he wants me to be a good steward, and I need to live on mission. I need to make sure I'm sharing the gospel and discipling people, and in my current reality, I need to make sure I'm doing all these things. That can be so overwhelming. So here is the goal. The goal, here's our mission, all right? Here's our uniqueness, and here's our current reality. The goal is to live as much as we can out of this circle. And that's our example from Christ. All right, we can see in Mark 139, that Jesus, he was healing tons of people, and they were all coming to him to get healed. And he says to his disciples, come, let us go to the town nearby, that I may preach there also, for that is what I came for. Okay, so here we have Jesus on mission, all right, obviously to share the gospel about himself. His uniqueness being God, he would heal people. And his current reality was where he was at, and people were coming to him. But since his uniqueness was that's really kind of what was happening. His focus was becoming all about his uniqueness, healing people. So he switched up his current reality, and he's like, come on, let's go to another town, because this is actually why I'm here. I'm here to tell people to make disciples, right? To seek and save the lost. And so he's moved so that this can be merged together. And that is our goal as much as we can. We are not perfect. We are not God. So as much as we can to think about, okay, so here's my gifts. Here's my uniqueness. How can I actually use that for the purpose of evangelism and discipleship? How can I use that? And then how can I use that with my life and the season of life I'm in right now, and the amount of time that I have or don't have? So that is our goal, our responsibility, our stewardship is to merge these as much as we can. So think through those questions. How can you merge the circles? What would it look like? Go ahead and jot down tons of ideas, asking God to lead you. God, show me how I can use these gifts for evangelism and discipleship, and how can I do it now in this season of life that I'm in? All right, see you in the next video.